All right, folks, we're going to go west, young men. Even though we're not really young. Hey, let me tell you. Well, I'm here on the furthest part of the East Coast. I prefer it now at this point because I did some time out on the West Coast, and it's a little different. But on the East Coast, you get to do a lot of different things down here. One of the big things is like oyster roasts. If you guys ever been to an oyster roast?
Do what?
Fan of oysters? You guys are a couple of fucking Midwesterners that are frightened of anything like that, like my wife.
Is that? No, I don't like oysters.
Through the Knights of Columbus, Chris, so you should be proud of me for that. But they had one, and I went to it. It was pretty cool. It's
nice.
It's been a while since I've been one. It's a lot of work to get an oyster out, but it's totally worth it if you know what I mean.
Did you join the? Did you join the Knights of Columbus?
I'm pledging right now.
You're a prospect, like the biker gangs.
Right.
What are your colors?
There's a couple of things that
he's not patched out yet.
I got to clear out through confession. Like I got to get to
That's why we're doing the show early, because he's got to get started and get to bed at a decent hour.
Get the audit from the Monsignor, and then I think I'm ready for my next step.
Are those the guys that wear that hat with the like white fur down the middle? Is that those guys?
Yeah, well, they can.
Yeah,
those
some
guys
of them.
They're
kind of look like pirates. They're like Catholic pirates.
Yeah, right. And before I
believe in God.
Let me get to the point that I was willing to make here. One of the things that I did as a man this weekend, which I don't know if it was really smart or not, because Carrie said to us about the show. This is how she described the show to me. She goes, "You guys are fools, but not foolish, and that's why I think people like your show." And I was like, "Well, I'll take a compliment."
She should add that to the intro.
Right, absolutely. Fools, but not foolish.
That's the quote of the day tomorrow.
Maybe that'll be the title of the show for all I know.
I'm a fool, but not
She's like, she knows we're going to the oyster roast, and she's from the Midwest, so she's a little leery, but so she wants to get kind of dressed up for it, even though it's Saturday Night Mass, Chris. You know how you can kind of check out Saturday Night Mass. You don't have to completely dress out for it, but she's like, so she comes in and she's asking me, "How does this look?"
Oh boy,
that's a trap right there. So I'm like, all right,
it's a trap.
It's a trap. It's 2026. I'm trying to be more honest with people, open, but maybe not so blunt. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to say about that outfit that you're wearing?" And to be honest with you, it looked good, but it was a little boxy on her. It looked a little like boxy, you know what I mean? Like it kind of looked like.
Okay, so what you try to do, be honest with people, is fail. But go ahead.
Right, exactly. Because here we go.
You look boxy.
I didn't say that, but what I did say was something to show that I'm open to diversity and things like that. And it's a collared shirt and things like that. And she's like, "Well, what's up? What's up?" And the shoes and everything, it was like I said, boxy. So I had to hit her with it so something she could understand. I go, "I think it's leaning a little lesbian for you." And she was like, "What?"
Wow.
I was like, sometimes they you dress like you look a little guy. It looks a little guy-like to me. And she was just like, and Tim's coming down the stairs and I hear him laughing, and that's the only thing that saved me from that moment. It was the fact that my son found it funny that I said that. But it was like, and then she changed her shoes up and it looked really great on her. She feminized it a lot more for me in that sense.
Feminized it more.
Yeah,
lesbian from boxy's kind of. I don't even know where that would
I just said leaning. I said the outfit's leaning a little less.
Leaning.
And I think it was
you're
more
leaning.
You should write Hallmark cards.
Alliteration would be mine. And alliteration sounds a lot like illiterate, and that's why.
Roses are red, violets are blue. You look like a lesbian, but I still love you.
But yeah,
there it is.
The oyster roast was a hit, but we got to bed early that night. Not much happened, so it was all good.
Even with the oysters?
Even with the oysters?
Yeah, I mean, it's like
missed opportunity.
The pump was primed, and
it's probably because you told her she looked like a lesbian.
Yeah, well, I didn't say. I said the outfit looked like it. I didn't say she did.
Well,
I love that woman.
What did you think that meant?
Right, it looked a little boxy on her. I like you look like a dude a little bit.
Well, maybe if you look like,
this keeps getting worse. You look like a dude.
Maybe if you would use the word boxy, you could take those oysters into effect. But lesbian, kind of,
We're riding to church laughing about it, and she says to me, "You know what? You are so lucky that I have such thick skin living with 4 men that are idiots." I'm like, "Yeah, there you go." And don't forget Chris and Scott, fools but not foolish. But anyway,
I never say things like that.
I never say things like that. But that all being said, I survived, and hopefully that's the case. But oddly enough, what we're going to talk about today, the day of this recording, is the day in history that President Thomas Jefferson, literally went to Congress and asked for, Chris, get this price, $2,500.
Wow.
to start a daycare. No, actually to finance the Lewis and Clark expedition after the Louisiana Purchase. The French sold that to us because they were desperate need for money because of the wars that they were involved in.
Right.
And he started that, and then Lewis and Clark were going to subsequently go west. And when they started in St. Louis, they subsequently went to Missouri River, and then through the Columbia River, and then they ended the Columbia River Gorge. And when I was out in Oregon, that was a big Lewis and Clark University. Like everybody kind of knew about that, and it was kind of neat to see. Like, wow, this is where it all started, in the low cost, obviously, at that time for a 2-year expedition, like 1804 to 1806. And, some of the history of that is kind of neat because they were like, it was a pretty diverse group. They went out there, a lot of Frenchmen, volunteers, 33 volunteers went with them. They went out there and survived, all of this stuff. They picked up Sacagawea.
Yes. Yeah. I was just going to ask, where was she coming into play?
She was only 24 years old.
Yep.
And
I
brought
didn't know
her
she was young.
child with her.
I love those gold dollars that she's on, man.
Right. And did you know on that gold dollar
Me
also
too.
is the baby? Her son is on there. He has a French name. It's kind of a cool name. But she went out there and helped guide them through it. And when they came back, obviously they came back to the same route. And along the way, they obviously met with a lot of Native American tribes, things like that. And what they brought back with them is like a lot of the geographic locations that we all know and some of the actual trading routes that still exist. And the other thing that I found out was really cool is they also found out in the Pacific Northwest, through the help of the Native American tribes, is where all the head shops were going to be, the tattoo parlors, coffee shops, and casinos.
Nose rings,
People don't want to acknowledge that, but that was pretty cool. And Jefferson was
Right.
out by the far into that. And have you ever been to Jefferson Memorial in DC? You guys?
Yes.
It's out there by itself. One thing else I noticed, because tomorrow's Martin Luther King Day, when you look at the Martin Luther King statue, one of the things observation that I made was, it's like he's looking very stern and he's staring right across that body of water that's there. And guess which monument he's staring at to make sure that things are legit?
Jefferson.
The Jefferson. And if you know Jefferson's history,
Mm-hmm.
you know why that the most prestigious black leader in the history of the United States, other than maybe Frederick Douglass, is staring at Jefferson. I looked at that. I go, did anybody else notice this? That Jefferson's getting the evil eye from Martin Luther King? Anybody knows that? Anybody knows that? But anyway, that being said,
everybody just got
and that
4 hours
completes
for your
today's
college
history.
degree.
I was going to say that completes today's history lesson.
Everybody put yourself down for 4 credit hours. If you're a bachelor's.
Right.
I just got a GED.
Right. I'm glad I can help.
GED.
I'm teaching people what to do, what to learn, and then what not to do, as in when you're describing your wife's outfit. Those kind of things are very helpful for you.
Come full circle.
We've got a couple things going on out there out in the Northwest where Lewis and Clark ended up at. Where you've got a couple of police leaders, and we talk a lot about leadership on this show and how it hurts and helps us as officers. And we're going to get into that a little bit today, talking about a sheriff out there in Washington State that's kind of coming up against some hard legislation that's being introduced. Washington can be described as a lot of things, and there's probably a lot of decent people out there. But there's some legislation that's being introduced that we've seen before, particularly Scott in Illinois with the Safety Act. And then, of course, you have the Portland chief, which we'll get into in that, and the Portland chief, on the Columbia River Gorge there.
They should give him $2,500 to go on a safari.
Right, exactly.
Dummy.
And we'll kind of get into a little of that. But it's quite interesting that, all of this happened. And, Scott's got to, probably give us a little detail like he always does on some of the information that we got.
Well, yeah. So this is a new law that they're considering, our Senate bill in Washington State. So other than the history provided by Shaun, Washington State is, like I said, is in this article, it says by Travis Yates, isn't really like on the forefront typically of things that are going on in the law enforcement world, other than being known for being, a bit on the liberal side out that way.
Right.
But now the Senate bill 5974 that the politicians out there are proposing, and what they're calling it is modernization to law enforcement that will, build trust, quotations, with citizens. Now, he very rightly points out that when you hear things like that,
I don't trust.
yeah, when you talk about, when you say trust, in these kind of situations, it's always suspect, because
Yep.
typically what you're saying is that it's something being seen as punitive towards law enforcement, and that's exactly what this is. So what is going on with this is basically they're looking to put they're calling it better training, background checks, law enforcement, and those things are obviously important. But the fact that the other parts of this are geared towards revoking officers' certification, um, and the guise of which they're doing this is things like and to quote it exactly, officers that engage in conduct including but not limited to verbal statements, writings, online posts, recordings, and gestures involving prejudice or discrimination against all the different classes. Now, obviously, law enforcement officers should not be out there um, doing any of those kinds of things, but when it goes down to it goes then into um, what type of force they can use. And again, these things are being reviewed by civilian appointed people who are not, they don't necessarily have any background in law enforcement. They don't know anything about law enforcement. They don't know anything about use of force and the things that you do when you're interacting with people. But then they also say that anyone engaged in any conduct or pattern of conduct that fails to meet the ethical and professional standards required of a peace officer or corrections officer, or otherwise jeopardizes public trust or confidence in the law enforcement profession. So, again, these are a lot of vague things that are put out there. And if you read more into this story, it also talks about groups that you affiliate with. Now, certainly it says, that they're groups, violent, hateful groups, you couldn't be associated with that. And no police officer should be associated with those. But what they get into is where it can be seen kind of political. And what if your politics determine what types of groups you're involved in? Like they use it as one example, like Turning Point USA. And some of these groups have been attacked as saying, oh, well, they're very, right wing and all these kinds of things. But
right, but who puts that list together?
Right, and who's to say that these people can tell you what type of political or social organizations you can be involved with? Obviously, you're not going to be a police officer and be involved with like hate groups or groups that are, enemies of the United States of America. But what if I am some, that's determined by like the Southern, what is it? The Southern
Poverty Law Center. Yeah.
Law Center, they make determinations, which again is based on their political ideology. And they say that some of these, Christian groups are, then they start calling people Nazis and all this other kind of stuff. Who's to say that this panel of people can do this?
And it goes back to what we were joking about earlier. You guys were saying, the Knights of Columbus. Well, religious groups under the last administration through the DOJ were being investigated as like radical because of what they believed in. Like they stood up and said, you're not going to come. A lot of these religious groups were going to meetings and people were affiliated with them saying, I don't want my kids to be taught these things. You want to teach them in schools. And they were identified and said, well, because you're Catholic or Christian or this or that, we're going to investigate you and see where this is coming from, which is in the history, go back to Lewis and Clark again, and the nation was founded upon the principles of tolerance of that stuff. And it's just like, to me, I read this and I said, well, who gets to define that?
Right.
And we've seen what who gets to define that was over the last 4 years, particularly, and what that did to a lot of people's lives. And it's another reason that as a cop, they'd be like, wait, because I'm not, it's a church group, but now that's radical. Like,
but that's what I'm saying.
This?
Right, because like I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. I've been one for years, and there's different ideas about Catholicism and the Bible and Columbus and all this other stuff. So who says that could be good or bad? But you're allowing known terrorist groups to get together and pray, but that's okay. But if I say something like that, that's a problem. But if you say something against the Knights of Columbus, it's okay. So like like we all have our prejudices, or we all have, you know, our visions of right and wrong, but who who's going to put out that say like, well, you know, the Irish American, you know, coalition, well, they can't because they're a terrorist group because, you know, they don't like the Polish American alliance, or whatever. But like, if you want to
That's
be
not true.
right, that's me. You know, I mean, so like, but I just don't
I
get
think
it. Like,
Polish girls are pretty and they wear clothing that doesn't look boxy.
Well,
They
another
were
example, another
form
example that they
fitting.
used here was like the COVID stuff. Look, go back to the COVID stuff and all the nonsense that was happening with that, where you were telling people, hey, you actually had agencies and places where people were being told they were going to be arrested for going to church, or being arrested for going here or
Right.
there, or not wearing a mask and not carrying a vaccine card, and all this nonsense that we've come to find was all a big scam back then anyway. So who are these people that have been put in place to decide that they are the ones that make the decisions on what is ethical and what isn't ethical? You know what I mean? Like, and that's one of the things that they used here as an example, because 5 years ago, 6 years ago, people were telling you, oh, you go here, you know, or you go outside, or you go in this place without a mask on, you're going to get arrested.
Right.
And it was ridiculous.
It was
Right.
videos of the Minneapolis Police Department being
Right.
used in
Threatening
conjunction
people.
with the feds at the time, which they were cooperating with, threatening people to get back into their houses because of COVID, which, you know, everybody conveniently forgets about that level of cooperation in Minneapolis, like we talked about on the show last week. But there is some hope out there in Washington, in that you've got the Pierce County Sheriff, Sheriff Shaw, I believe his name is, who has actually gone before. There's a video out there, and I'll put the show link in the show notes of him standing up to this. Pierce County, if you don't know where it is, it's just south of Seattle. And it is, you know, Tacoma is one of the bigger cities in it, Puyallup. It's like 941,000, I'm sorry, 941,000 residents are there. And he was very blunt about, good luck with this if you try to come after me about this because you disagree with my politics or whatever. He is sounding a warning alarm out there to say, hey, whatever. So, you know, again, we ask for this as officers. We want brave leaders, and we want to stand behind these leaders that, you know, stand up to this stuff that's beyond the pale of what the Constitution says. Like, these are witch hunts on cops because politicians don't want to deal with the fact that their policies don't really work, and you have to send out foot soldiers of cops to deal with it when people are upset, to keep people safe while they're protesting, and if everybody's protesting right. But at a certain point, when somebody, particularly an elected official, like we talked about with sheriffs before, they're going to stand up to that. And this whole loose and fast idea of what they define as behavior that's not in line with, you know, the position. He's
Right.
like, you guys are defining that. Good luck trying to get rid of me if you disagree with me. Because
Right.
apparently they must have in the past, because you're going to have a lot of people that are not going to agree with that. Just because, you know, one side wants to disobey lawful orders and become civil disobedience because they don't agree with the laws, or actually their policies that are not very popular. They can do whatever they want, but do you think that's only going to be relegated to one side now? Like, you've got some leaders that are standing up. Well, I'm not saying that he's promoting violence, but in the same sense, he was like, good luck with that. Good.
But they are, because I mean, seriously, why don't we start with the basics? Why don't we define a man and a woman before we start going crazy with all this other stuff? Because unless listen, even though we're policemen, we still have personal lives. I'm not saying be a member of the Black Panthers or the Ku Klux Klan or whatever. I get that. But I cannot determine what is appropriate and not appropriate just because I don't believe in a club or a get together. I don't believe in I don't believe in the Democratic National Alliance. So does that mean if a policeman belongs to the Democratic National Alliance or the Republican Party that it's considered like I think we are not focusing on what we need to focus on, and we're trying to make all this stuff up. And the bottom line is it appears that they want to become a lawless society and go after the policemen, because my personal life should have nothing, and it does, whether it's positive or negative. As policemen, our personal life does.
Right. And it's always used, all of these things are used to penalize law enforcement in the name of making things better with the community, right? And I can tell you, here in Illinois, with the Safety Act and Trust Act and all this stuff, it's done nothing to benefit law enforcement. You know what I mean? Like, you've made it more difficult for law enforcement to do their job. Have you held criminals more accountable? Absolutely
No,
not. What you've done
no.
is you've gotten rid of cash bail, so people just walk right out. And we've talked about this before, how these crimes that you see here that are news stories or press releases where people are getting, detained and held in jail, are things that 20 years ago it was an automatic, because
Yeah,
you did
yeah,
this act, you suffered the consequences, right? And those consequences were posting a bond to guarantee that you will come back to court to face these charges against you. And the
right.
bond was set appropriately based on the severity of what the charges were. That's what is missed in this whole
And
thing.
and not just to like put a comma next to that. And the bond was adjusted for people who couldn't afford certain
Right.
bonds based on the
Right.
crime. So it has always existed. What they just did has now made it zero. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. And so what they're doing is, and I see this, right? Because I see it in all different size police agencies here in Illinois. What you're doing with these acts that are supposed to be, created to make law enforcement more accountable. Should law enforcement be accountable? Absolutely. Like, we say that all the time. We've been saying that from the beginning. But what it's doing is hamstringing all these police agencies to run through all these extra things that they have to do to meet these state guidelines. Now, should cops be trained? Of course. Police departments should always focus on training. That should be one of your top priorities, is to make sure that your people are well trained. Some departments have bigger budgets for it than others do. That's just the way it goes, right?
Right.
But what you're doing is you're literally, through the things that they're doing here in Illinois, and this seems to be like it's going down the same path with this thing in Washington State, is what you're doing is you're literally, in my opinion, you're like defunding without saying it's defunding police departments. You are, and I see it. I talk to police officers, right? And they say, like, oh my God, this guy is doing double duty in his job because you have to meet all these training mandates. You have to do all these things. Now, where we worked, we had a very large training unit. Shaun was part of that. I mean, we got some real top-notch training, and we had the ability to adjust when these things started coming out. But there's a lot of smaller police departments, because this is just a blanket thing across police agencies. It's not really based on the size of your department or anything. It's like, you're going to meet these mandates, you are going to do these things, or else. And now,
Right. But
you're going to start decertifying people here, that if they're not making these certain training mandates, and it's not because they don't want to do it, but who ends up paying the price for this is the people in the community that expect the police to be out there doing the things for them, right? Like answering their calls, doing proactive policing, all the things that cops should be doing out there. Their time is cut short doing that, because you're meeting all these mandates. People are having to do multiple jobs or take time away from their primary job, whatever that is in their police department, to manage all of this. And it's a giant pain in the ass, and it's not working here. And that's the thing is, they rolled this out here, and there was never anything to go back and say, well, what's come of this? What we threw this on every law enforcement agency in Illinois. How's it going? No, you think they're ever going to do that? No, never.
No, because they won't. I mean, the same thing. You had Colorado that legalized marijuana. Then the mass failure of that. Then everybody else followed. But here's my thing, and I'm not. I'm trying. I don't want to take as much time as I did last week because I was on a roll. But,
it's awesome.
but like,
Come on now.
but here's what I'm saying.
Do it.
The thing is just like the bad guys. You have these politicians that are trying to put together all these things and all this and all that and listen. It's always been there, just like in the state of Illinois. We have had rules, regulation, laws about guns. Enforce those laws. There's nothing else to make up. Allow the police to enforce the laws, just like policeman discipline. We have rules, regulations, laws, statutes that we have to abide by for the regulations, or that we have to abide by. Like let's just focus on those, because what you're going to see all in all is that the majority of policemen are doing a damn bang up job. It's the politicians that are letting the bad people go because they want the votes, and then they're getting people hurt and all this other stuff. And they're like, okay, well, we can't focus on that, so let's focus on how we could get more policemen in trouble. No, hold them accountable for the rules and the laws that they break based on the rules and the laws that you've already voted in. Hold policemen to the standards that you voted in. Now, are there changes? Are there adjustments? Absolutely, on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. But you're not even focusing on what's already in existence. Mm-hmm. You're making shit. Try to stick to the wall to make to everybody. Well, I need to be loved. I need to be voted. No. You are a politician. You need to do your job just like the policemen should do their job. Everybody should have expectations and consequences for the job they're supposed to do. Enforce those, and you will have a better place and a better foundation to start. Stop making shit up.
Can I get a hallelujah?
Amen. Oh, my God.
Yeah,
well, it's just
one of the things that is also missed on this that makes the job even harder is that, from what I understand, the state bill also is going to require officers to consider when using force and taking enforcement action, all of, just like usually it's case law and law that exists, that has existed for a long time, that we all well know, like Grant v. Connor, Terry v. Ohio, all the stuff that we talked about on the show at many times. But there are also courts in that, district that are going to make decisions that can also be challenged and moved on, and legislation that's created that's often later challenged in court and things like that. But officers have to make decisions based upon that as well, considering that. So when I'm making a decision about use of force in a tense and rapidly evolving situation, I have to be completely up to speed on what all of the subordinate courts to the Supreme Courts have said, the Supreme Court has said, and I have to make a decision on that, and that can also get me decertified and in trouble, and in some cases charged and incarcerated. And it's like you're making it completely impossible because, first and foremost, a lot of times judges under the Supreme Court, because it's the final law of the land, get it wrong. That's why there's an appeals process, and it makes it all the way up there, so it's the final law of the land. Legislation is challenged all the time. This could be something that could be challenged in court, this state bill, to say this is literally an unfair labor practice because you're making it nearly impossible for that. And anything you disagree with as a politician, because, by the way, politicians don't have to go through any of the things that an ordinary police officer, I'd say even some cases community service officer, has to go through to become a politician. You don't become a politician, you just need a money and a microphone and a crazy stance and something that people want to pay attention to you about, or you come to it famous beforehand. To become a police officer, you have to do a psych test. You have to do a criminal background investigation. You have to do a medical examination. You have to do a financial background investigation to make sure that you're not susceptible to any of these things that these people are saying that we're going to show some sort of a bias by being in this group about or whatever. The politician, they can say or do whatever they want, and then they can also put you forward to be decertified, and they'll also have the power of appointing the people that are parts of these groups that get to do the decertification process. How could anybody in their right mind do anything other than what Sheriff Swank is saying? Like, we have to fight this to the end because you're going to literally destroy law enforcement in the state of Washington. It makes no sense, but they keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Luckily now, Sheriff Swank is a great example out there in the Pacific Northwest to be as brave as Lewis and Clark was to push his way out into that and make his way into that stuff. Tie in there, great tie in, right? To challenge this, to say, hey, this is what makes sense, this is what doesn't make sense, and to see what happens. But the problem is that we've gotten in this age now where it's uncorked. Like, people that don't enforce the laws anymore are now going to go, I don't trust you as a politician because you're too whatever. And the county of Pierce is going to be like, we're not that county that supported this. We're not with the state legislators on this. And this is going to be where it gets very warlordy is what I'm afraid of.
And they want to put that genie back in the bottle. Right. Good luck with that.
Right. We saw it in Minneapolis this past week. Those are the kind of things when we talked about in the last show. Now, obviously, the governor there and the mayor that we openly, cranked on are now like, oh, we need to get it back under order. Good luck. And if you're not, like Jacob Fry said, if you're not coming here to peacefully protest, you can leave. That sounds like a lot of the things you said about ICE too, buddy. I'm glad you're coming back to it, but dude, it's too late. It is way too late. It's way too organized, and it's way too late. And the problem with it is that you have weak leaders that are making this more and more evident. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, this happens to be people that are appointed by politicians to lead. And in our world, that's often chiefs.
Right.
I've seen way more chiefs that have to worry about these folks. Now, I'm not saying all chiefs are bad. That's not my point. I work for a great chief, man. The best one I've had.
But we
in
have
25
worked
years.
for some terrible ones.
Right. But we
Oh.
have guys that are more like worried about the politics of something without standing up and saying, hey, I have to educate you to this process. They will side with the people that are keeping them in these positions, and they don't want to lose their golden jacket from the National Academy. That kind of stuff. The more that stuff that's actually in their office, the less likely they're going to lead you because it's you've made it to a club, and you don't want to get kicked out of that club because they take your yellow brick back and they throw it through a cop's car window.
Right. But I mean, it's just, but again, it's just like, I understand things need to change. I understand things need to, and you have to, you want to get voted back in and all this other stuff, but like, we just have to, like, what's right is right. And I am not always right. And I'm the first one to admit that I'm not always right. But when you're a politician and you're up there and your sole purpose is to make laws of the land, protect America, protect American citizens, like, I don't understand it. Instead of focusing on what we need to focus on, like the mess in Minneapolis and getting that under control, and the violent protests and ICE and immigration and all this other stuff, we're going to worry about in Washington D.C. They want to start making rules and laws and stuff about discrediting policemen. Like seriously, there are 5 things in the state of Florida that you can lose your. I mean, there's more, but there's 5 things that are in writing that will get your creds taken away. Like, what do you need? Like, what is all this? All they're doing is they're building that big book of policy. So when a policeman steps out of line, you can go, oh, page 472, line 2, subsection A1, you didn't do this, therefore you're fired. So what you're creating, and what they don't realize, is that they are creating, like everybody is here said, a lawless society that the genie's already out of the bottle. It's going to make it worse, because now you are not only going to get rid of the policemen and policewomen that are out there dedicated. Who's going to want to take the job? Usually, they don't want to take the job now.
And the people, and you're going to scare them into not wanting to do anything. I mean,
right?
Not taking action.
You know what I mean? Like, they're not gonna want to do it because you are like, oh my God, if I do one thing wrong, I could potentially get decertified or lose my job, or a big part of police, right? And a huge part of police work is being proactive, is being out there and looking for things, like making contact with people, making traffic stops, because some of those small things can lead to bigger things. That's the kind of stuff that you should be doing as a good police officer. And unfortunately, this will have the opposite effect. And you'll just get men and women who will say, you know what? I'm going to sit in my car and I'm going to take the calls when they come. Outside of that, I'm not jumping out with anybody. I'm not making traffic stops. I'm not, engaging with people or walking my, apartment, just whatever. The stuff that you've always done, that proactive kind of stuff, you're going to say, well, everything's, I'm under a microscope all the time.
Right.
And we talked about this before, that even with like body cams and everything, like, people are still wanting to jam up the place.
Yeah.
You're wearing the camera, man. Like, we're doing it. That's what you're doing 24/7. And these folks out there, it's just disguising their dislike of the police with calling it improvements and trust and these buzzwords and phrases that they say.
Right.
But as I alluded to earlier, fear not, citizens of the Northwest. If you want your chief to be a bowl of cold oatmeal, look no further than Portland. I'm just on the other side of the Columbia River Gorge there in Washington, Pierce County. That chief this week has drawn a lot of attention because of his, how would you guys define what that was? I mean, Like,
Uh,
Josh Allen just got emotional because the Bills got a really bad call, and he felt like he let his team down, and that really
right,
impacted the team.
right.
A man that is engaged in some level of, like, let's call that combat, competition. Maybe it's much more like understandable. I'm not saying that men can't cry and show their emotions, but when you're leading a group of police officers that have been under siege for this long, and
Right.
you cry because someone got shot on the
Hmm.
heels of what happened in Minneapolis because they were members of a Venezuelan violent gang that's known to have come across the border. And when an arrest was being executed in the city of Portland by ICE agents, these people started attacking the officers with shovels.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Take away the guns. Obviously, you can use a shovel. Shovel can't hurt you.
Sure.
Bullshit. So one of them got shot, and during the press conference, he had to admit the fact that ICE was correct in what they were doing, what they were there for.
Mhm.
But then he had to make an emotional plea. The chief had to make an emotional plea to the citizens of Portland and break down in tears, so much so that he had to take off his glasses and wipe his eyes to let everybody know, particularly the folks in the Latin community,
God.
understands the fear that they live in. Even though that these Venezuelan gangs are there preying upon those Latin American communities, because who do you go after first? The people you know the best. And it was a despicable display
Yeah, it's awful.
of, like,
I-
I mean, I don't know how these guys in Portland, these officers in Portland have, like, literally are like, what? They must be
Right.
like, what is
This
going
guy, right?
on?
He's such a pansy. Like, how do you How do you look at yourself standing up there in
Right.
that uniform with all that brass and stars and all that stuff on, and you're like crying up there about, like, it is pathetic. I mean, there's
Right.
just no other way to explain it. It's
No,
pathetic.
and your city's been under siege for 7 years, and you can't get control of that.
Right.
Like, seriously, at what point do you just go, all right, hey, hello, Mr. President, could you send in the National Guard or whomever so we can get this under control and, let it know, end this thing? Because it's been 7 freaking years of this nonsense.
Yeah.
And now you have ICE in there, and ICE just shoots a guy that's going to kill him with a shovel, and you're crying. How about you get your city under control, you retard?
Stop pandering.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Chief Bob Day, his name is Bob Day. His day is coming. I hope he won't be there for long. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's Portland. I mean, I was out in Portland for a while, and it wasn't this bad. But, like, this is like something you would expect from a Portlandia skit if you've ever watched that.
Right.
This is like the guy's crying about agents and officers taking the steps necessarily to defend themselves. You took away the guns, you banned them, you made it illegal for people to have them. They're here illegally to begin with. They're exacting arrests, and then they're attacking ICE agents with shovels. And you're crying about
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's no crying.
Hey, it's time to hang it up. Okay,
There's no crying in
It's
baseball.
time.
Right.
You're done. You have lost the vision of police work at that point. Like, you're done. Hang it up.
But listen, you
Retire.
got
Go away.
Yeah, because we had to shoot somebody, and we've said this a million times. We don't wake up in the morning wanting to shoot somebody, and we still have to. We still have emotions after that shooting, and we still are human. But you're going to sit there and cry for the person that wanted to kill one of your officers with a shovel because he had to do what he had to do. How about going out there and say this is a tragedy? The suspect made a choice. The policeman felt that his life and others were in danger. He had to do what he had to do. Let's keep them both in our prayers, because the policeman now has to live with this for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the
No
family
one died
lost.
in
Right.
the incident. I'm not saying that it makes it any
Right.
easier on anybody, but there's no fatalities in that. But, like, the
Right.
idea
And
is,
the
like,
other
how
idiot
about
tried to hit him with a shovel.
you're brave like the sheriff from Pierce County, and you say, you know what, come time this nonsense, we all need to work together in law enforcement to make this happen. These problems, as they pointed out this week, aren't happening in cities that aren't cooperating with federal authorities. They're
Right.
happening in cities that are coming out and being Confederates, like the Civil War, going, we're not going to follow these laws. Because the bottom line is, folks, whether you want to believe this or not, they need these people to be in this country illegally, because that's the only way they're going to try to win elections moving forward. They've sacrificed everything in the process. Law and order. This chief is up there crying as a representative of law enforcement and public safety for the city of Portland, a large city in the United States, because that's what the people that appointed him wanted him to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's pathetic. It is pathetic that this is where we're going.
Yeah, and it's going the levee is going to break, and I think I think the levee is going to break for the American
If it keeps
people.
on raining, the levee is going to break, Chris.
Right.
Yeah.
Boys don't cry.
Right. You go from Led Zeppelin to Cure. That's about right.
Right.
That's about
I
right.
just wanted to do a 180 on your music. Right
Just, wham. But you know, it's just the levee's going to break, and it's just it's going to be for the good of the word. But the amount of work that I feel for the policemen, the National Guard, and federal agents that's going to have to clean up this mess. It's God bless them, but it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a lot of
project
work.
for
It really
sure.
is. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway,
Well,
out of one quick last note. Speaking of Venezuela, you want to talk about freaking heroes? I don't know if you guys saw that whole sonar thing. How our Navy SEALs came in there and like just swooped in and took this motherfucker in 3 minutes.
Maduro, you're talking about.
Yeah,
obviously,
Maduro. So
President,
first
yeah.
off,
The former
He's like
held up.
flashbangs without the flash.
You would think of, yeah, it was. So really quick. So he's held up, and the people who are protecting him are Cubans because he doesn't really trust his own Venezuelan people. So there's a problem. And then so our Navy SEALs come in and they do this sonar thing. All those bodyguards and stuff are like puking, nose bleeding, couldn't had like dizziness and all that stuff. Helo lands. The team gets out, just does what they need to do, grab up the two people, jump on a helicopter, and they're gone. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I say we need to start doing that in Portland.
So these guys were like the nosebleeds. They were shitting and pissing blood and stuff like
Yep.
that. That's what you're saying, Chris? Really?
Yeah. It was some type of sonar, and I'm like, man, I have a feeling that we got to keep. I don't know if it's sonar, but something like that. But that would be just awesome. I need put your earmuffs on, and then all of a sudden you're and they're shitting blood in the street. That's all right.
Yeah.
Fire department for a wash down.
Well, I think what it probably was is they just probably dropped in, like they parachuted in a big Cuban, like one of those food trucks that didn't have proper sanitary. And then the Cuban guards were like, oh, look, the Cuban sandwich that everybody raves about. They went over and got him, and they got really sick. And they're like, we just give it about 3 hours, and these guys are all going to be puking and shit.
Oh, God. Anyway, well, thank you to those heroes that took care of that. I really appreciate that. You are true heroes. But for everybody else, you guys are heroes for listening to our show. Please go to where you get your podcast, leave a rating, review, download, subscribe, tell all your friends. We are trying to make this world a better place between civilians, policemen. And if you have a suggestion for a show, a question, concern, want to be a guest, have a suggestion for a guest, please email us at 3copstalk@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, 3copstalk.com, and you get old episodes, and you can also leave us an email there. Otherwise, thank you truly for listening, and have yourself a blessed day.